Apologies for the slight delay. Welcome to today's lecture. Okay, today's one should be quite quick, quite easy. No, not easy. Relative to the last two that I did, today's one will be quite easy. It's a big issue, but it will be quite easy to understand. So let me just quickly explain. Okay, just rewind, as in, what was that word called? Recap, yes. We all know that 1MDB and Petro Saudi signed a JV agreement. This was on the 28th of September 2009. And we all know that after 6 months, 31st of March, they then terminated the JV agreement and converted it into a loan. Okay, that much we know. So it's very simple. They used to have 40% in 1MDB Petro Saudi. They sold it. They invested $1 billion US. They sold it for 1.2 billion, but they didn't take the money back. They converted the 1.2 billion into a loan for 1MDB Petro Saudi Limited, which is no longer a subsidiary of 1MDB. Okay, and Petro Saudi provided a corporate guarantee for this particular loan. This loan is known as the Murabaha notes. Murabaha loan, Murabaha financing. It is basically a loan. So that's the recap. Now, looking through some of the documents that was released by Sarah report yesterday or day before. UBG. Yesterday. Okay. It uncovered a few documents that were quite interesting. I won't talk about UBG. I leave UBG to another date. That one is complicated. Okay, but I want to look at the financial report of 1MDB. Okay, which I've given you some of the relevant pages. Financial report is a report that is 42 pages long, but I have basically just given you the key parts of it. If you look at page 23, you would have a copy with you. Page 23. This refers to the transaction that I talked about just now. Okay, where he said that the investment in a jointly controlled entity. Okay, on 28th of September 2009, the company entered into a joint venture agreement with Petro Saudi Holdings, wholly owned subsidiary of Petro Saudi Limited, a company incorporated in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Okay, what is important is the third paragraph, where it says subsequently on 31st of March 2010, the company entered into a share sale letter agreement to dispose of its investment in the joint venture company for a consideration of 4.14 billion ringgit or 1.2 billion US dollars, and the consideration is payable to the company through the creation of indebtedness in favor of the company via the issuance of notes receivables, which are the Murabaha notes. Okay, so it's very clearly stated here that the transaction took place on the last day of the financial report. Okay, 31st of March 2010, stated in the financial accounts. But based on some of the documents that turned up in Sarah report, okay, there was an email discussion on the share sale and Murabaha notes on the 4th of May 2010. This is 4th of May. This is a letter from email from Patrick Mahoney to Project Uganda. Project Uganda was the discussion over the UBG, where it involved Jolo, it involved the 1MDB officials like Nick Faisal and so on. Okay, where they shared and discussed the following documents: Murabaha loan agreement, Petro Saudi letter of guarantee, as well as the letter of agreement between Petro Saudi and 1MDB. This discussion was after the agreement was purportedly signed. Okay, now next document is even more incriminating. The next document is Notice of drawing. That means what 1MDB Petro Saudi asking for more money from 1MDB. Okay, basically 1MDB Petro Saudi asking for more loan. They already borrowed 1.2 billion. 1MDB Petro Saudi subsequently asked for more from 1MDB, which is why it's called a notice of drawing. And it referred, this particular document referred to Murabaha Financing Agreement dated 14th of June 2010. Now, that means the agreement, Murabaha Financing Agreement, was only signed on 14th of June. Okay? The next slide actually just gives you a brief overview of the loans that were taken. It updated some of the information I had presented earlier. So 31st of March, they are supposed to have converted 1.2 billion into loans. September 2010, they gave 500 million, which was the notice of drawing you saw earlier. In May 2011, they gave another 200 million. And the one I missed out in my slides last week was another 130 million given later in 2011 to make it a total of 2.03 billion, which is the amount stated in the Age in their report last week. Okay, total of 6.2 billion ringgit. This was actually presented in the next year's financial report, 2012, not the one you have in hand, where it gave the full amount of 2.03 billion US dollars. So this is just for info. Okay, going back to what I was talking earlier. Who's responsible? Okay, 1MDB 2010 financial report is signed by Syahrul Azlal bin Ibrahim Halmi and Dato' Ong Kim Huat. They are now Dato' and Tan Sri respectively. Okay, it's dated 4th of October. So all these events have taken place and the audit report was finally signed on the 4th of October. Okay, this is the page. It's also attached in the document I have given to you. Okay, the next page is a statutory declaration signed by Syahrul Halmi, where he solemnly and sincerely declared the financial statements set out on pages 5 to 37 to the best of his knowledge and belief correct, and he made this solemn declaration conscientiously believing the same to be true. That means basically he says that everything stated in the accounts are true. Okay, and this is also dated 4th of October, and the statutory declaration is attached in the document I gave you. But more importantly, auditors. Now the auditors' responsibility, as stated in their own letter, also attached in the last 2 pages of the attachment I gave you, clearly states that the procedures selected depend on our judgment, including the assessment of risks of material misstatement of the financial statements, whether due to fraud or error. Basically, the auditors have a responsibility to identify misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. Okay, and in the letter by the independent auditors, they say that we believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinion. This auditor's report was signed by their KPMG partner, Ahmad Nasri bin Abdul Wahab. This was the key partner for the 3 years that KPMG audited 1MDB. So 2010, 2011, and 2012, before they resigned and Deloitte took over. So the question now is, auditors will surely have seen these documents. The fact that the agreement was only signed on 14th of June. The fact that the entire discussion of the Murabaha financing was after the financial year, 31st of March. How is it that they can sign off an account which states that the Murabaha financing agreement was signed or the transaction took place on 31st of March 2010? This is a very, very serious discrepancy. Okay, as stated in my statement. Okay, there is no question that KPMG would have had complete access to the JV agreement and all the relevant materials which were completed before 31st of March 2010 to arrive at its full report. The apparent, fighting. The apparent attempt to hide this information, okay, missing the word attempt, to hide this information from the financial statements, and the failure to red flag the above transactions meant that KPMG would have failed their duty to protect the interests of the government and the Malaysian public at large. To protect the integrity and independence of the International Chartered Accountants, KPMG must declare its role in the Petrol Saudi scandal, and if there had been omission and negligence, intentional or otherwise, in its audit of 1MDB. The failure to do so would necessitate an investigation over its conduct by the Malaysian Institute of Accountants as the statutory body established under the Accountants Act 1967 to regulate the accountancy profession.
This document is for the 500 million.
Yeah.
Okay? But what I'm saying is this document referred to the Murabahah financing agreement which was dated 14th of June. You got me?
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it is from this document that we found out that the Murabahah financing agreement, which is the master agreement, was only signed on 14th of June. Okay? Because after they signed, then they asked for another 500,000 on the 8th of September. 500 million, sorry. 500 million on the 8th of September. So my point isn't the 8th of September 500 million. My point is the fact that the Murabahah financing agreement was signed only on the 14th of June, which is after the year end of 31st March 2010.
So you're saying that it was signed after the financial report for March
Closing.
ending 31st March 2010 came out?
No, it hasn't come out yet. Okay. The year end is 31st of March.
Right.
Okay. Murabahah signed on 14th of June. Audited report signed on the 4th of October. Because audited report you get about 6 months to sign. But the fact that it signed on 4th of October doesn't mean that things happening after 31st of March gets included under the 31st of March. Things after you put under subsequent events. This is how the financial report should be. Okay. So the fact that you're signed on 4th October means that all these things took place already. Then the auditor signed off the report, claiming that the agreement, the share sale agreement, was actually signed on the last day, 31st of March 2010.
Instead of actually.
In this case, the statement here shows Murabahah financing agreement was only signed on 14th of June.
Well, we can explain the significance of this. Why is there any motive?
Okay, the significance of this. Sorry, I forgot to explain the significance of this. Very important.
The significance of this is my last slide, which I didn't show. This is the date. They don't need to reveal all this, where 700 million was immediately taken out and transferred to Good Star Limited, which was, as we know now, an account controlled by Jolo. The JV agreement details no longer needs to be reported in the March 2010 financial statement. So by converting into a Murabahah loan on the 31st of March, the auditors no longer need to disclose the content of the agreement in the audited report, which includes incriminating evidence that 700 million was taken out from 1MDB Petrol Saudi. That's why I call it a cover-up. The conversion to Murabahah notes is a cover-up of the joint venture agreement, which contains information about 700 million being taken out of the joint venture. So the question is, did the auditors help 1MDB cover up this transaction? if they didn't convert to Murabaha by 31st of March, the details of the JV agreement will have to be included in the audit report. And the fact that there is 700 million that is immediately taken out to its parent company. Okay? And the fact that all the other material information in the JV agreement, such as the investment by Petro Saudi, will also have to be disclosed, which I have stated earlier that investment didn't really